I'm Mark Z, and you're watching Thorin, the best interviewer behind Travis Gafford.
I don't know about you, but as the year goes on and excitement builds for MSI, for the World Championship, I start to think about all the great players and great teams that I'll see face off against each other. And of course, I want to see them play in the playoffs. But thanks to the format of these competitions, in contrast to certain other esports games, you don't always get to see some of the players that are hyped that you really want to see in the playoffs. They just, they don't seem to either make it there or they're not there very long, Well, every single year, either during or after Worlds, we have this same discussion that happens on Reddit, on social media, that says, what about the format of this tournament? Could we change it? Could we tweak it? Could we make it better for fans, better for competition, better for the prestige of the tournament? Particularly because there'll always be comparisons with the Invitational, which always takes place before Worlds for League of Legends. I mean, obviously, both games are MOBA/arts games with a shared common history. So it's quite obvious to contrast how the scenes are run and the formatting of the tournament, because famously the International is double elimination, always has been. It uses group stage, which doesn't eliminate all the teams, so you get to see a lot of play from all the teams there. Quite famously, it produces some amazing games because of how many are played and how many rematches you get, and the fact that you're not out of the tournament after getting upset once, for example. You get lots and lots of great storylines as a result. Quite frankly, you get some very unexpected but incredibly memorable storylines, like the sheer number of teams that have actually done amazing lower bracket runs, including going on to win the championship. I think it's happened 3 times. It actually was very close to happening 5 times or something ridiculous like that. But you might say, okay, then why isn't this video called Make Worlds Double Elimination? Because if I had the choice, I absolutely would make Worlds Double Elimination overnight. The problem is this: expecting Riot to change the World Championship in its format. If you know Riot and you look at their kind of track record, their history with both how they've set their tournaments up, what they seemingly want from a tournament, the philosophy that informs it, and then how they go about changing it, it's just not plausible to expect Riot to actually listen and then change Worlds to Double Elimination, no matter what you say. Whereas I feel as though MSI, that actually seems a bit more plausible. Riot is like a steamboat. If you want a steamboat, a massive streamliner to turn, it ain't going to happen immediately, and certainly isn't going to happen all at once. It's going to slowly and gradually happen. It's going to take a while. You better be sure about which direction you're going in, and eventually it'll be there. Riot's more like that. You can ask for and hopefully suggest smaller format tweaks. They clearly like single elimination. It's been so prevalent in their best tournaments, in their top Premier level competitions. I mean, amusingly to me, they use double elimination a number of times in those promotion tournaments to get teams into the LCS, but for some bizarre reason can't see the benefits of it elsewhere. Okay, one of those weird things. I assume a different person was in charge of making that decision, that executive decision, as it were. Plus, they've had the whole cutbacks this year, which means that you would suggest that they're probably not going to want to increase Worlds in terms of how many more venues they need, in terms of how many more days it will be, in terms of how much more money the sheer cost and the production aspects will be. Then you've got to add in, there's more games to play. And finally, they just don't really subscribe to the idea of having simultaneous games, which is a key part of how, for example, the International is able to have so many games and then go into a double elim tournament, as well as having all those games and not eliminating some of the teams from the group stage. MSI, it's a newer tournament generally. It's clearly not the most important tournament to Riot. It's one that they've already messed around with the format on. They've added in play-ins for that one as well. So they've shown they were willing to have more games there than the old format. It's a smaller tournament as it is. And actually, the fact it's a smaller tournament, even though it has in theory the best teams from each of the regions, I think it's actually still lacking a little something to make it more distinct in contrast to Worlds. It can't just be like a mini, not as good version of Worlds. We want it to be its own unique tournament. Sure, not the World Championship. It's not that kind of scale, but incredibly special in its own right. And I think this could give it a unique flavour. So first of all, it's a smaller tournament anyway, so you don't have to add too many more days. We're not talking about having 16 teams play this or 24 teams or whatever. We're just talking about a couple more days to play out a few lower bracket matches, and then that's all you need. You don't even need any more games in the group stage. It's also going to create more games between the best teams in the tournament because it's the playoff bracket. Those are the games you want to see anyway. Sure, some of them aren't going to be great. Some of them are almost certainly going to be amazing though. And in fact, the fact that some of them will be rematches or teams that are now on their second tournament life and maybe had a hard time in the upper bracket but now have learned things from what happened elsewhere or come alive because they've had a little bit more breathing room will mean you get a lot of amazing games in that lower bracket entirely to watch. as a result, I think it'll make the tournament more interesting to watch. Those low bracket runs at the International always excite people, capture your imagination, making how far could they actually go? Like starting round one, are they going to go all the way to the fight line? It really adds an extra dimension of interest to it. Meanwhile, the upper bracket games are still amazing. They're still fantastic matches. Sure, it's not elimination games, but they are in a way. You're losing one of your tournament lives, it becomes less likely you win the tournament or harder to win the tournament. It's still very important to try and get into the final from the upper bracket, to play less matches, not to have to rematch people, not to give away too much by showing people what you've got. There's still great storylines all over the tournament. I think, as I said, it would add a unique flavour. I think it would add extra prestige to this event, because it would, in theory, make this tournament in its own way, due to the format and the competition level of the teams all being the best in their regions, potentially the hardest tournament to win. It would make Worlds still the most prestigious, the biggest tournament, the one you want to win, the number one tournament in the world. But MSI might actually become the hardest tournament in the entire world to win, arguably. I mean, it would even have a factor that would go above and beyond LCK and the LPL. Obviously, LPL at times has used double elimination. LCK, no, not a double elimination tournament, a single elimination tournament, even then a gauntlet style one where you don't get to see as many playoff games overall. So that would be kind of a unique feather in the cap, as the old cliche goes, for MSI, right? You could even, if you don't want to make it too many more games or too much more in terms of adding in days and number of matches to cast and etc., you could even make the lower bracket best of 3. I mean, it's better than what we have now, which is nothing. I think a lot of people would even accept that and say, right, if you go into the lower bracket, that's part of your punishment. You know, you have to go through all these best of 3s, not full best of 5s. Then if you get to the final, now let's see what you can do in best of 5 again. Also means if you rematch someone in the lower bracket, it's going to be in totally different circumstances. It's going to be kind of a bit more tense, actually, than when it was a full best of 5, because you can't fuck around as much. Then add in, at MSI, only 4 teams make the playoffs traditionally anyway, right? So this would make the playoff format more sturdy. It would make your win, in theory, as I say, more challenging, crucially more respected. If you're a team who, like if RNG had beaten Kingzone Dragon X in 2 series to win that tournament, then it would be undisputed they're the number 1 team in the world. It would be even more drastic for Kingzone Dragon X. It would be even more of an incredible feat for RNG. I think it would make them the clear-cut number 1. No one would really be able to dispute it, right? One of my problems is this. In the past, you've had scenarios where the lack of double elimination actually fucked people over. The best example ever is the 2016 MSI. This is the one where in the group stage, what you might remember is SKT was bleeding games all over the place. They even lost a game to CLG. They were losing games to Flash Wolves. RNG, who had Mata in their team, didn't crucially have Uzi at this point in time. They had Whoosh as their AD carry, and they'd been using actually Name during most of the split up until the deep part of the LPL playoffs. This team rocked the whole tournament and actually was the number 1 team in the group stage, got the number 1 seed. But because of SK Telecom dropping so many games, SK Telecom was the number 4 seed, so RNG had to play SK Telecom in the semi-finals. SK Telecom, as they typically did, got stronger as the tournament went on, figured things out by the time the playoffs came, and by the playoffs came, were unbeatable pretty much, and just smashed everyone generally. They closed all the games out, and so RNG didn't get to go to the finals, didn't get to show that they were the second best team in that tournament, because they ended up having the misfortune of one format not fit, SKT not doing very well in, who were amazing best of 5 team, and so it's RNG who actually got screwed over on that one, and people don't even remember how good they were at that tournament. People think, CLG was the second best team at that tournament. They were in the finals, right? Yeah, because they played Flash Wolves, unfortunately. So I actually think RNG would have been amazing to see them in the low bracket. What if they'd have played CLG and beaten them? What if CLG could have beaten them and actually shown that they were the second best team? What if they could have rematched SK Telecom? What would have happened in that kind of scenario? All these great angles on what could have happened in that tournament that we never got because it was single elimination. Now, as you've seen, I heavily emphasize this format, not just for great games, but for the storylines and the narratives. Like, in a double elim tournament, it's way less debatable if the team that wins was actually the best team there or played the best. There's way less kind of margin for flukes and for one-off upsets, or for, as you see, something weird happening in the group stage, which then makes the playoff bracket wacky, and suddenly you've got the top 3 teams on one side of an 8-team bracket if it's Worlds, and suddenly, is it really actually the team that came second was even close to the second best team? You know, there's all these factors that come into play that aren't as big a deal when you have the double elim. One aspect I like about double elim is you get rematches. This has been proved to be very cool at the International. I think in League of Legends it would work similarly, because much as with Dota, the drafting element would come into play, the game game within a game in that sense. You now have experience literally playing that team in official matches and adapt and respond accordingly. You can change up the comps you play, or when you then come with a similar drafting strategy, similar comp, it means that you thought that still works or should have worked, but didn't in the game before. There's so many great narratives and storylines to pick up on, and there's all the games you played in between, right? They lost to them in the upper bracket here, but then they just won these 2 series here. They're meeting them in the final. Let's look at what happened in the lower bracket and how they've changed as a team and came on strong after that initial loss. And the team that was in the upper bracket, did they remain dominant throughout? Did they actually play their best game? All these storylines organically will be produced and can be very easily harvested that make for a better viewing experience and, quite frankly, a better competitive experience, in my opinion. Then you've got to add in one of the main purposes of MSI and Worlds, as you can see by the way they structure it, unlike tournaments like the International and the CSGO Major, which are more about just having the best teams and just playing the best tournament, is in League of Legends you want to have the different regions play each other, right? That's why you have the group stages where you definitely play teams from the other regions. That's why at MSI you want the group stage to play every single other opponent. Even though I'm not a fan of round robin, I get why there's a purpose to that for League of Legends. Well, this would produce more games between the best teams from each of the regions, so we could see them match up a number of times, not just maybe once in a year or once in a year in a best of 1. They never played in a best of 5, a best of 3. This way you get more of those matches, which was the kind of the remit of what MSI is supposed to be. Then, as I alluded to with RNG, it means that the seeding for the playoffs isn't going to kill you dead. You can overcome that. There's almost an error correcting element. If in fact there was a wacky one-off best of 1 that's now changed where people are seeded, they can go through the lower bracket and meet people later on. And as I've alluded to before, no storyline in esports, quite frankly, is sicker than a team coming from the lower bracket all the way and then winning the final when they're underdogs, when the formats put them as underdogs, but they've managed to show resilience, come back, maybe adapt, find their real level, find a level they've never been at before. This makes it more special, more prestigious, more challenging to win these tournaments. So I think MSI would be the perfect kind of test tube, the laboratory experiment as to whether this format was good, and then let's see about the other tournaments. Let's ask something reasonable of, I personally think it's reasonable to change Worlds to be sick anyway, but within the paradigm of League of Legends and what you expect from Riot Games. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas, Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, James Harding, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my upcoming content? Perhaps you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA. Do you want to see some teasers? See who's going to be the next guest on one of my shows? Maybe you want to take part in an esports discussion with me. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.